So we welcome you to the big story. German Jolly, also known as Yon Yon, the leader of Haiti's 400 Mawozo gang, has been sentenced to life in federal prison without parole for orchestrating the kidnapping of 17 missionaries, including 16 U.S. citizens and a Canadian national, back in 2021. The victims, affiliated with the Ohio-based Christian Aid Ministries, were held at gunpoint for 62 days and released after a $350,000 ransom was in fact paid. Jolly was convicted of conspiracy to commit hostage taking and hostage taking of U.S. nationals for ransom. This morning, we're very, very pleased to be joined once again by the award-winning journalist and Pulitzer Prize finalist who serves as the Miami Herald's multilingual Caribbean correspondent, Miss Jacqueline Charles, who is my very special guest at this time. Season's greetings, Miss Charles. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you. Season's greetings.
All right. Wonderful. Can you start by giving us a little bit more information on Jolly and the gang, the 400 Mawozo that he headed?
Yes, so this kidnapping occurred in 2021 in October. And Jolie, who's known as Yon Yon, he actually was in prison in Haiti, and he directed this gang from behind bars.
Really?
With an unmonitored cell phone, yes. And so not only did he direct this kidnapping, but he was also running a gun trafficking pipeline from Florida to Haiti. He had associates based in the Miami area, and they were basically going and purchasing high-powered rifles, putting them in boxes of, containers or marking them as toys. But in fact, these were, arms and ammunition, and they were headed to the gang so that the gang could carry out their criminal activities. And on this particular day, this group, 17 individuals, including an 8-month-old baby, they were visiting an orphanage in the eastern part of Port-au-Prince, not far from the border Haiti shares with the Dominican Republic. And when they were coming back, gang members basically pointed their guns at them and forced them to step out of their vehicles. Let me just say that up until this moment, the gangs kind of stayed away from white people, from Americans particularly. Mm-hmm. I mean, we had an incident a couple of months earlier where there were some French citizens, including priests and nuns, who had been kidnapped by this gang. You had Haitians, and of course you had Haitian Americans. But in terms of them like actively targeting Americans, it was sort of like, let's just stay away from there. So when they did this, it was a game changer. It basically sent this message that now not even white people are safe in this country as far as this kidnapping issue. And then also in paying the ransom, when that ransom was paid, armed gangs started to realize that they can demand their price. Mm-hmm. But let's go back to the actual day of the kidnapping. When they kidnapped these individuals, people were just trying to figure out where they were. And, in Haiti, missionaries and aid workers, they're all on the same WhatsApp group, so they all keep in touch with each other. And so when we started to hear that this incident had happened, the first thing was trying to figure out who kidnapped them and where they are. Yes. Eventually, the gang went on social media. They claimed responsibility for the abduction, and then they demanded $1 million ahead, which was $17 million. And at some point, they said, you know what? In lieu of the money, we want to get Yon Yon out of prison. And so that became a negotiating tactic. What you should know is that this group, Christian Aid Ministries, they're Mennonites, Anabaptists. Mm-hmm. And so they are very much, it's God's will. They really were not interested in paying a ransom. In fact, they didn't even want to deal with the criminal charges on this. But someone either close to the group or in their circle or saw this did pay that ransom. And then, the way it's been portrayed is that these individuals escaped. Some of them were released earlier on because they were sick, but 12 of them were held for 62 days. And when they got out, I mean, even I initially reported it as, oh, they escaped, because that's what one of them said when he testified in church a couple of days later. But as I started talking to people who were closer to the situation and who knew what went down, what they said to me was, no, they did not escape. The ransom was paid. Yo-Yon got into a disagreement with his number two, this guy who is now running the Katamaozo. His name is Lamont Sanju, which translates to English, death doesn't know which day that it's coming. And at that point, he really wanted to keep his word, right? We negotiated, we made a deal, and so Lamont Sanju wanted to keep his word, which was, I'm going to release the hostages. Yo-Yon instead wanted to keep the hostages until he got a guarantee of his freedom while he's still in prison in Port-au-Prince. And so what Lamont Sanju did is basically had his guards unlock the doors, and he put people along the way to guide them out of basically, which was like a forest. These people, they had no idea where they were. This was like no man's land. I mean, just, very rural area. And so they basically made their way from where they were being held captive to the road. And when they got on the road, they were able to flag somebody down. And that's how, they finally got their freedom.
Wow. To the best of your knowledge, no one actually lost their lives. None of the kidnapped individuals.
No, they did not. And in fact, they talk about, how they were praying, for their captors, while they were there. And in fact, yesterday during the sentencing hearing, one of the victims of this, she basically said, she told him, she says, I love you and I feel for your mother because I know this is breaking her heart.
Yeah. Do you have any information whatsoever as to who or how the ransom money of $350,000 US was handed over or paid?
No, I mean, that person has basically chosen to stay anonymous. And like I said, this group, they're a little bit like the Amish, not into sort of modern technology and that deal. But they were not really interested in paying the ransom. They were leaving it to God, let God take care of this. But, that's a long time for somebody to be held, captive, and especially when you think of you have an 8-month-old baby. I think there are 5 children overall in this group. And so someone stepped forward and paid the ransom.
Yeah. How did the Jollies, the defense team, respond to the life sentence?
So, they were asking for a maximum of 25 years. He previously got 35 years in the gun trafficking conspiracy case, which was tried first. And he was given his sentence earlier this year, in June. But his team basically was trying to say, you know what, when you compare his sentence to his co-conspirators, he should not get life, and at most he should get 25, and 25 should be served at the same time as the 35. So basically they were looking at a 25-year sentence overall. And then they said, well, he was an entrepreneur. He was helping give people land. He was protecting them from bandits. And by the way, his mom and his dad, they abandoned him. They went to the United States, and so he was raised by his aunt. And so the reason why he's the way he is because, his parents were not around. The judge was like, no. The judge basically said that he found that he still had not accepted responsibility, acknowledged that he was the leader of Katamaozo, which is the 400 Maozos. In fact, in the previous trial, they provided audio transcripts because at some point the U.S. government was tapping his phones, or at least the phones of the associates, and he referred to himself as, I am the king. I am the king of the kings, the king of the gangs. So that's where that whole idea of the self-described king. But despite, what he said, on these audios and his conversations with associates, in court, he was still denying that he was in charge, and he was denying that he was the one that was involved in helping to orchestrate this kidnapping, or that he also tried to use this as leverage to get his get out of free jail card.
Okay. Do you know his age or approximate age of this gentleman?
He's 34 years old.
Oh, okay.
34. He's 34. I mean, this guy, there's a lot, this case really, thrusts the whole criminal gang situation in Haiti and the lawlessness right into the global spotlight. But for Haitians prior to this case, they were living with this whole criminality of the 400 Maozo. They control the territory not far from the U.S. Embassy. The U.S. Embassy is in a city called Tabar, and Quadabuque is like right next door to that. So the U.S. Embassy itself is surrounded by at least 4 gangs. And so before these gangs united, as we now know them to be, Vive Ensemble, this powerful coalition, they were constantly fighting each other. So there was constant clashes. And 400 Maozo was a very powerful gang that was being run by a guy who was in prison in a national penitentiary. Can you imagine? That this guy is, he's in prison. But he is still running and directing this gang. When they received money from kidnapping, he was telling the gang how that money had to be spent. But he also had people surrounding. He had like family members who basically were spies who were spying on his own cousin, Lama Sanju, who was just basically a proxy for him. And let me just say this. When he was finally extradited to the United States, the State Department at the time under President Biden, they kept using this as an example of, hey, you see what we did, sort of similar to, what happened in Jamaica with Dennis. But the difference here is that when they pulled him out, the gang was weakened temporarily, but it was only temporarily. It was very short-lived. Today, the 400 Maozo gang is one of the more powerful gangs in Port-au-Prince, where armed groups control up to 90% of the Haitian capital. So it makes you also have to ask yourself, if I pull out this one powerful leader, it doesn't mean you don't, but you pulled him out and you have not crushed the gang.
Yeah, I get your point. But what message do you think that this sentencing will send to other gang leaders? I can think of Barbecue, for instance. Any reactions whatsoever?
Well, look, the United States, these gang leaders all have sort of bounties on their heads, $1 million and up. I think Barbecue's, it's at $2 million now. And so, the United States clearly wants to send the message that, you do the crime, you're going to do the time. But in order for you to do the time, you have to be able to be on U.S. soil. And so this is the first major gang leader who was taken out in its own U.S. soil. They've taken out maybe 1 or 2 others, but they're not major. They were sort of minor lieutenants. But until you go back in and you extradite another major gang leader, I don't really see that this is going to have much of any sort of impact. That's the issue in terms of Haiti. Is the U.S. has been issuing sanctions, and they talk a good game, but Haitians are sort of cynical, and they're basically like, you need to show me. So until they actually reach in and put somebody else on a plane and they come here with them, that's when you may start to see the force. But until then, it's like, oh, okay, you grab him, he's just another criminal, that happened to be extradited and then happened to, get some time in a U.S. prison.
So, Ms. Charles, to the best of your knowledge, has this case sort of, obviously it highlights the challenges that aid workers and so on face in Haiti, but what impact has it had in terms of additional aid workers going down there and trying to be of assistance to the impoverished country?
Well, it's not so much the case that it's had an impact. It's just the reality of the situation. If you're an aid worker, in order for you to provide aid, you have to be able to move around. And so imagine being able to move around in a place that's under 90% controlled by gangs. And on top of that, the United States in May, designated, armed groups, this powerful coalition, as a foreign terrorist organization. And what that means is that if you are paying an extortion fee or one of these toll roads, or you're trying to get access into one of these communities that they control. And if you're an American citizen, you could be brought up on terrorist charges. And so that has also had a profound impact on on aid workers and on just assistance in general, because a lot of people are afraid of this. And imagine even today, if you have been kidnapped or you have a loved one who's kidnapped and you are an American and you pay a ransom, you can be brought up on foreign terrorist charges because you have now passed money to a group of individuals who have been deemed foreign terrorists, global terrorists. So it's not so much the case as it is the reality of what we're dealing with today, being able to move around and the fear of, these charges by the U.S. government.
And finally, he has been sentenced, Yon has been sentenced to life in prison without parole. Is there any talk from his attorneys in terms of an appeal?
We haven't heard so, but most probably we'll see. I mean, he had public defense. The first case with the arms trafficking case, that was a bench trial. There was no jury, and he did not testify. And then towards the end, he actually pled guilty on that and says, "Okay, I'm guilty. Yes, I was the guy on the other line running the pipeline to get the illegal guns into Haiti for my gang." On this one, he was still pushing and saying, no, that was not me. I was not the guy that you talked to for this kidnapping. So we have to wait and see if he does try to appeal. The one thing that the judge did grant him was the ability to serve his prison time in Florida. That is something that he wanted because his mother is here, and he has family members here. So. Mm-hmm.
All right, we'll wait and see. But thank you so much, Jacqueline Charles, for the deeds that you provided this morning on this very current case of Yon, the Haitian gangster, getting life in prison in the United States. Thank you so much, and have a good day.
Thank you. You too.